My name is Paul Rauschenbusch, and I am the Associate Dean of Religious Life here at Princeton University. You have tuned in for a very special day because with me is Professor Brother Cornel West, who is the class of 1943 university professor in the Center for African American Studies. But I will say university professor is what describes Dr. West best here at Princeton University, nationally and internationally. This is a gentleman, a man who creates an avenue for discussion, for opportunities for encounter, the life of the mind, the life of the spirit, the life of the heart. And so welcome, Dr. Cornel West.
I am blessed to be here indeed, and I salute you for the work that you do here. You are such a magnificent force for good at Princeton, our beloved Princeton.
Our beloved Princeton.
Absolutely.
I want to welcome you. I want to mention just a few of the publications that Dr. West has had over the years. He is the author of Race Matters, Democracy Matters, Restoring Hope, Prophecy Deliverance, Hope on a Tightrope, and now we have a new book out, which is Brother West, Living and Loving Out Loud. Welcome, Dr. West.
What a blessing.
Brother West, this is a book about you, which is a new thing. And this means that we have the opportunity to live your life through these words. And I want you to be able to tell us today, who are we going to meet in this book? Who has helped make Cornel West who Cornel West is today? Who are these people from your family, encounters in the community, unexpected people you have met through your travels? Can you name a few of those people, introduce us to them?
Well, my dear brother, it begins with Irene and Cliff. I'm a mama's child and daddy's kid. Irene B. West, Clifton Lincoln West. And I don't have language to describe them. They're just beyond description in terms of the love that they had for me. Dad is gone, mom's still here. And the sacrifice that they made for me. And so from early on, I got a jump start in life. When you have that kind of love, that kind of saturation of genuine compassion. I mean, it was unbelievable.
You really felt it.
Oh, my God. I can feel it now. I can feel Dad's love from the grave. Definitely. But that family, the West family, is inseparable from Shiloh Baptist Church.
Huh.
Oh, yes. Reverend Willie P. Cook and Deacon Hinton and my Sunday school teacher, Sarah Ray. It was an extended family, so that love saturation.
Family.
Oh, I'm a Shiloh Baptist kind of brother, and I will die a Shiloh Baptist
Where is
kind
Shiloh
of brother.
Baptist?
Sacramento, California. Okay. Very much so. But then my neighborhood, you see, it was a chocolate slice of Sacramento. It was the black section of Sacramento, California. And we had so much love as a neighborhood rather than a hood. Real ties of empathy and bonds of sympathy there.
So you walk down the street and people know who you are.
Mrs. Ray, Mrs. Burton, Mrs. Stuckey, you know, Mr. Reed, all that love coming as the Little League with the sports and so forth.
Responsibility for you as well, telling you when you're maybe going a little bit off track.
Accountability, answerability, you know, and it's true all the way through school. Nona Saul and Cecilia Angel, who were white teachers who meant the world to me. You know, I was kicked out of school when I was in 3rd grade for refusing to salute the flag.
And why? Why did you refuse
to? You know, my
great
great uncle had been lynched, and they wrapped his body with the U.S. flag as it hanging from the tree. I was 8 years old. I was in Texas.
And you had seen this?
No, they told me stories of it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And so when I got back, I said, you know, I associate that flag with some very negative things. That was the underside of American democracy, you know, Jim Crow, Jane Crow, lynching, and so forth. And so I got in trouble, got kicked out of school, little brother, which really hurt my mother.
Did you explain to them? Were you able to put into words what it was?
I tried to explain, but I got in a fight. The teacher hit me, I hit back, and got kicked out of school.
Wow.
It created a riot and so forth.
Wow.
And so when I was out of school, mom sent me to take an exam, IQ exam, and I did fairly well. I got about 160 something, I think it was. And they said, "My God, this little Negro has potential." So they sent me to a school for gifted children across the way, and that's where I met Sister Nona Saul and Cecilia Angel, the two white sisters who really had magnificent teaching skills and made a fundamental difference in my life. But you see, the love continued. Same was true when I got to Harvard.
But you know, what's here is you have there were a lot of people who could have said, that's it.
Oh, absolutely.
After you get kicked out of school,
Absolutely.
Already we can see where this is going.
Headed toward the prison, industrial complex.
Yeah, but it's about not giving up, finding the place where you could enter.
That's exactly. I mean,
don't you wonder sometimes, like, who's in prison who just didn't have that chance to turn back?
Oh, my God. I've taught in prisons now for 30 years, and I've seen folk whose sharpness and critical intelligence, but yet they made one bad choice.
Yeah.
One bad
And they didn't
choice.
have this community to move them back into this area. And today you wonder if there could be a Cornell West, because if someone did that, that would have slated them, and you wonder if you hadn't had that community that said, okay,
real.
well, we're going to, and the parents.
So I think it's hard to find the kind of love I had in my life in present circumstances. The market is so thoroughly permeated every nook and cranny of the culture. It's hard to find that kind of high quality family love, high quality school love. And it was true also at Harvard and Princeton. When I arrived at Harvard, the love I have from Hillary Putnam and John Rawls and Roderick Firth, he's a Quaker. He's my dear brother. And when I arrived here at graduate school, Paul Benasref, he loved me to death. Oh, good God Almighty! He's like a father. He wasn't the only one. Tom Scanlon, Tom Nagel, Gregory Vlastos was magnificent. Walter Kaufman would have me at his home all the time. Those were magnificent days in which there was a kind of high quality relation between student and faculty. I'll never forget those days.
And you had Shiloh Baptist when you were in Sacramento. What did you have when you got to Harvard? I ask that as someone who's concerned with religious life in the university setting. Did you have a place where you could say, okay, here I am at Harvard, but I can bring my Christian heritage with me. I can bring all that entails with me. Yes. Or did you have to leave that behind in favor of a life of the mind?
Well, that's a good question. One is that, I did two things. First thing I did when I got to Harvard was to find out where the program for poor children was that Black Panther Party was sponsoring. And so I ended up working the Black Panther Party breakfast program for 3 years. I was there.
Wow.
And the prison program. But then I was also head of the superintendent of Sunday school at Mount Pleasant Baptist Church in Roxbury.
You've always done both, though, haven't you?
Oh, absolutely.
All of this comes together,
No,
and that's what feeds it.
I'm a Jesus-loving free black man. Loves my way through the darkness and try to promote justice. You know what I mean? And that's just the way I am. That's where I die.
So tell me about that. Tell me how do you see the Jesus on the page when you read scriptures, and how do you take that out of the page? What compels you? Because I think that's a good question right now for those of us who are kind of, I'm a liberal Christian, progressive Christian. I don't want to be too compelled by Jesus. I want to acknowledge him.
Right.
How do you get compelled by Jesus to get out there and do something? And then how do you know what to do?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with just my own formation. See, when I say I'm a blues man in the life of the mind and the jazz man in the world of ideas, that puts the stress on the spirit. So there's a sense in which I'm more concerned with the quality of spirit than I am even correctness of doctrine, which means I've got more pneumatology than the theology. So that this
more spirit than the spirit.
How much love is in it? Is it a high quality commitment to service to others? Are you willing to take a risk? What kind of price are you willing to pay? Those, for me, are the fundamental questions. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And in that regard, then, I ended up, I've worshiped in Catholic churches for many years when I was married to a Puerto Rican sister. It was magnificent. The priest was a wonderful priest. I can imagine if I'd gone to another priest in another Catholic church, it would have been problematic.
Right.
But even as Black Baptists, I could have gone to certain Black Baptists and got run out because of my struggles against homophobia. Right. And my profound love for gay brothers and lesbian sisters. They'd have put me, well, they'd not run me out, but they would have had a kind of excommunication halo over me because they figured I was going too far and violating some of their doctrine. But it's really the spirit of the thing. See, in that sense, I'm much closer to the Russians. I'm closer to Dostoevsky in terms of being a holy fool.
A holy fool.
Yeah, somebody who's just on fire. With a certain kind of aspiration to compassion, because none of us are fully on fire with love, but we attempt to be in such a way that is more the witness bearing than it is the doctrine correcting. And that has to do with lived experience. It has to do with what kind of human being you want to be before you die.
And tell me how how the cross, how suffering fits into this, because that's such a big part of it. You know, I think that one of the tricks of Christianity is that a transactional moment that just that allows me to separate myself from the suffering?
Right.
Or is that a call?
Well, no, I think for me the suffering is always already there.
It's there.
Oh, yeah, it's always already there. The pain, the sorrow, even the grief in the morning when loved ones die, when friends die, and so forth. So in a way, that's the given. That's the raw stuff upon which we must work.
Yeah.
And you choose either be a wounded healer or a wounded herder. Are you going to use the wounds that you have to help heal other people's wounds? Or are you going to use the wounds that you have to quite kind of naturally reinforce others' wounds just to let them know that you're not the only one wounded? That's more of the kind of natural thing to do. So that's why I believe grace is very important. I don't believe we can do it by ourselves. I really don't. I don't believe in human autonomy. That's why this text is the opposite of the story of a self-made person. I'm not a self-made man.
This is the opposite of the self-made person. This is a person who has been made by God, by many community,
family,
by love, by
community,
spirit,
Harvard,
by music.
Princeton, music, friends. Richard Rorty, our dear brother, I've got allusions to him, you know, my beloved mentor. You know, where would I be without Richard Rorty? I can't even conceive of it. And it's not just his support. The brother loved me.
Yeah.
He loved me at the deepest level. I loved him we're together at Stanford University, as you recall.
I know.
For his memorial.
Yeah.
You were wonderful.
Richard Rorty was is a cousin of mine and was a professor, perhaps a teacher of Dr. West, a great philosopher. Wonderful. We had a wonderful memorial service for Richard Rorty out at Stanford, at which Dr. West spoke. I remember that one, the anecdote by his daughter, who told the story of these workmen who came in and did this project for him, and he said he paid them way too much, and he said, "When the revolution comes, will you protect my house?" And they said, "No way, mister. You can't pay me enough for that." But that was the kind of, he was a funny man, but a wonderful man.
He was a witty, loving, very self-effacing human being, but he made a big difference in my life.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
well, in many lives.
Many lives.
One of the things that I've quoted you on, I spoke at Chautauqua this summer on the ethics of capitalism. And I used your phrase, moral maturity. And I wonder, can you tell me, how do we develop a moral maturity? Unfortunately, I missaid it one time. I said moral majority. Everybody laughed. I said, no, backtrack, rewind. Moral maturity. But how do we develop as individuals, but then also as a country, a moral maturity as it comes to economic systems, as it comes to how we treat our most vulnerable, how we do foreign policy? What are some of the pathways you see in front of us as we do moral maturity, as we grow up?
You know, it's fascinating that, really this book is about the power of love, but it's also about the power of paideia, P-A-I-D-E-I-A.
Yes.
And I think moral maturity can be one of the effects or one of the products of undergoing an endless and ceaseless activity of paideia, of deep education. Because moral maturity comes from courage. You have to have the courage to examine who you really are, to come to terms with the dark corners of your own soul, and then be able to try to forge ahead to become a better human being. So that paideia is precisely about that formation of attention, that shift from the superficial to the substantial. And then a cultivation of the self where you understand you have a history. You have to understand yourself in relation to a tradition. You have a community that shaped you, a family that shaped you, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but you can't deny the fact that the shaping has taken place. And you got to come to terms with your mortality. So you got your history on the one hand, and you've got memory that goes along with that. You've got your family and community, your present, and you've got mortality. The fact you're going to die. No one of us escape. No one of us get out of space and time alive. So the question then becomes, given that, do you have the courage to examine who you are? Do you have the courage to try to cultivate the capacity to love Not just wisdom in the abstract, but other human beings. Not just your family, but what I call spillover love. Or what Jesus called, when Jesus in the Sermon on the Plain talks about loving your enemies. That's the logic of superabundance, because you got Leviticus 19:18 says, love thy neighbor, that rich prophetic Judaic tradition that Jesus flows out of.
Right.
But that's the logic of equivalence. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Love thy enemy. That's the logic of superabundance. You can't do that unless you have unbelievable courage and a little grace.
But how, I can see how that happens with the individual. How, moral man, immoral society. How do we get there as a society?
See, as a society, it's only the morally mature ones who bear witness. You know, it could be Frederick Douglass, it could be Dorothy Day, it could be Martin King, it could be Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, it could be Noam Chomsky. I mean, it takes the secular forms, it takes Christian forms, Judaic forms, Hindu forms with Gandhi and so forth. They all set a standard. You say, okay, they may not be able to change the world by themselves, even with their movements, but they're setting a standard of what truth-telling is, and what trying to be concerned about the persons whose voices are lost, or the weak, or the least of these. 25th chapter of Matthew is all about, you see.
Right.
And when you have that sense of what the standards are, we know we're going to fall short. But Samuel Beckett is right. You know, the wonderful line he has in his last prose fiction of Wordsworth Ho, we try again, fail better. Try again, fail better.
That's what progress is.
That's what progress is. So when we die, we raise a question, how good was your failure? Because I know I could have loved more. I know I could have served more. I know I could have written more. I know I could have changed the world more. I couldn't do it all. But I gave all that I could. That's the crucial thing.
Every day is precious to try.
Every day you try.
I have a question about this book. Okay, so we can see you're a triumph. We were talking about. There's a high school named after you already. There are pictures on walls. Where were moments when you came against an idea that changed your mind, and how were you able to change your mind with grace? Because sometimes, I remember Dr. Jim Cohn, who was a professor of mine at Union Seminary, where you also taught.
Oh, absolutely.
And he said, he opens his systematic theology saying, I am looking to you as my students because you will teach me where I need to go next. Because when he started, he didn't really talk about women. He didn't talk about gay people. He wasn't interested in Latino suffering. It was his students who brought him along and said, you know what, I hear you, and I will hear you if you will hear me.
Yes.
But that's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to be confronted with someone and say, you haven't thought about this yet. Can you think of moments in your life where you had to come up against something that you hadn't considered, and someone confronted you with it and changed your mind on something? I think changing your mind is one of the hardest things.
I think that's one of the most courageous things. I think, for example, in my own relationships and talking about my marriages, though, where I have to be vulnerable, I have to take a risk, where, in fact, I have to be willing to change my mind about my reading of a situation because I've been blind based on my own fears, insecurities, and anxieties. And that's a very complicated set of dynamics in a marriage, in a love relationship, or even in a friendship in a certain sense. But for me, probably the most difficult moments where I've had to change my mind is when I was convinced of X in a personal relationship and turns out not to be true, and I had to courageously both acknowledge I was wrong, acknowledge that the source of my wrong had to do with my own insecurities and inadequacies, you see. And that's where, a genuine humility, so it's not just a posing in the form of a modesty, but you really know you're a cracked vessel. At the deepest level, you know you're a cracked vessel.
But how can you talk a little bit about how you get to convince it? Because you could be arguing, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, maybe you're right. Is that the way it happens?
No, it's not usually in the minutes of the argument.
That's not what it happens.
You need a little distance from that.
Right. Oh, you're right.
It's more a moment of contemplation by yourself, thinking like, she was actually right about that. She hit something in me that I didn't want to go there, but in fact, I have to go there, and in going there, I have to reconceive of not just where I was and what I was doing, but in part who I am. In part who I am. No, it's true. And that's it's a painful thing. But I mean, all learning, and to philosophize to learn how to die, as Montaigne said. Right? So that
Wait, I'm sorry, say that again?
To philosophize is to learn how to die. Because something inside of you has to die in order for something to be reborn. And if something parochial is blinding you, that needs to die for something more cosmopolitan and broader and deeper to be reborn. You see. And but that's a painful process. Oh, absolutely. It's a lot less. There's a lot of existential agony in that, and that's paideia. That's what really paideia is.
Right.
I mean, I tell my freshman students here all the time in my freshman seminar, the tragedy, comic, and the political. You know, we do Plato and Kafka and Chekhov. And
is that the
Eugene
course you
O'Neill.
teach with?
Well, no, that's one all by myself. 'Cause I teach another one with Brother Robbie George on great books. But this is one I teach by myself, and I tell them, I said, you all come in my class and learn how to die. So, what you talking about? That's right. You're going to learn how to die in order to learn to wrestle with figures who are trying to teach us how to live. But we have to find our own voices, so we don't imitate Sophocles or Shakespeare or Chekhov. But we've got so much to learn from them because they've got profound insights to what it is to be
But just
human.
the way you said it there, of course, that sounds like Christianity to me.
Well, Christianity has that structure.
In that
That's
sense
right.
that
Paul says you got to die every day.
That's very
You
deep.
got to die every day. No, absolutely. Absolutely.
So tell me about, you have done music, you've done philosophy, you've done religion, you've done art. Where do these things intersect for you? How do these various vocations, things that you feel passionate about, where's the core? And what is that? What are you feeding, and what is being fed?
I think your word vocation is the key. You know, a certain kind of calling. I've never been called to preach. I'm not a Christian preacher. I've been neither licensed nor ordained to preach. That's a sign of divine wisdom, actually, that I've never been called to preach. But my teaching is a certain form of ministry, and therefore it's a kind of vocation or a kind of calling. And that requires a passion to communicate in whatever form it is. So my 3 CDs trying to communicate to young people who may not read my book. The Matrix and so forth, trying to communicate on the screen with the Wachowski brothers, you see. Radio commentary, my dear brother Tavis Smiley, trying to communicate, no face, just voice. You see. School, room, trying to communicate. Street, church, synagogue, mosque, temple, prison, just trying to communicate. And that has to do with trying to interact. Because when you really love, I mean, the dominant form of love is what you call an interaction. I mean, it's intercourse in the broadest sense of that word, because you want to share. So when you really, really love somebody, you want to share everything with them. Everything, every thought, every moment, every reflection, every evaluation. You're just on fire to share, you see. And when you take that beyond even a personal relationship, when you love people, you want to share. You know, when I go to a lecture, I want to try to share with people all that I am, not just what I know. That's what makes it a blues man. Because a lot of professors just want to make it cognitive. Oh, no. When people leave my lecture, I want their souls to be touched. I just don't want their minds to be affected. I want them to say that there was somebody who laid bare not just argument vision, but laid bare his soul, his sense of what it was to be human, the joy that he finds in being human, the joy he finds in sharing, the joy he finds in interacting, the call and response, which is at the center of black culture, right? The sense of going back and forth, back and forth. No one of us on top. It's not a call response in a vertical way. How things going down there? I'd like to hear what you're saying. No. This is a back and forth. It's like Duke Ellington, right? He's conducting, but it's call and response, you see. He's just another participant in the orchestra. And that's part of my
students must
tradition.
Just soak that up.
Well, the students here at Princeton have been so kind to me, though, but that was true, you know, at Harvard and Union and Yale. But students here at Princeton are very special, though. They work so hard. They embrace. They are challenged. Their lives are changed, not in terms of agreeing with me. I don't want students to agree with me. I want them to find their voices. You see, I want them to be able to wrestle with who they are, because each one of them have a distinctive singularity as persons, almost like a thumbprint, fingerprint.
And they are eager to wrestle with that.
Absolutely.
I never have to say,
Absolutely.
let's pay attention. They are there. They want to go.
Absolutely.
You know, they really do.
That's
It's
one of the
amazing.
joys of teaching
It
at
is
Princeton.
amazing.
You know,
It is
I thank
amazing.
Shirley Tillman,
Yeah.
one of the visionary leaders of higher education, for inviting me back to Princeton.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. So, who are the spiritual heroes that you continue to call upon? And who are some spiritual heroes that you see from the past, but who are some spiritual leaders heroes or people who you admire today that you think people should know about that maybe not be on the national radar?
I mean, for me in my own life, I mean, when I think of real heroes, even role models, I really don't think of so-called celebrities or well-known people in the pantheon of struggle. I start with my brother. See, I don't know anybody who is wiser than my brother.
What was his name?
Clifton. He's still strong.
Clifton.
And, oh yeah, he's he and I, like white on rice, man.
Okay.
You can cut him and I bleed. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You pinch me, he shouts. He says that's how close we are. And then my father, who has passed, who is dead, I should say. I never met anybody who could be so consistent and profound in his spirituality. He's a very soft-spoken person. You see, so me and Clifton will never be half the man my father was. So that I would mention those two even before I mentioned Martin King, because I never met Brother Martin. I read about him. I heard him speak when I was 10.
When you were 10?
Oh yeah, I was moved by him.
Where were you?
I was moved, Sacramento, California, Memorial Auditorium.
Wow.
I was moved. I don't really remember too much of what he said. I knew when he was done, this brother's for real. Whatever he talking about, he is for real. He's serious, brother. And I love that about him. But some of the historic figures who I've never met would be people like Martin Luther King Jr. and Abraham Joshua Heschel. Anton Chekhov really means the world. So does Samuel Beckett. For me, those two towering writers, though both of them lapsed Christians, have so much love, compassion, patience in their work that it just reinforces my own Christian sensibility.
That's something.
Even given their agnosticism, it's a fascinating thing.
Yeah.
It really is. It's really helped sustain me. There's no doubt about it. But there would be others, though. I mean, who would be some of the others? It's a good question. John Coltrane. Oh
John
my God.
Coltrane.
Yeah, I got a whole chapter on Train
Uh-huh.
in here. I should not forget him. Love Supreme, Giant Steps.
Yes.
I've got a picture of his wife and I,
Uh-huh.
Sister Alice, in there. She just passed last year. She's another towering figure of spirituality and artistry. Very much so. Those would be some of the people who I would think.
And a wide
sustain
mix.
me.
Again, you have the religious figures, you have the art, the writers, life of the mind, and then you have the musical, and just because we can get these inspirations from so many places
that
come together to make us who we
true.
are, and not to be ashamed. I think sometimes this idea of the sacred and the secular, this is where I'm going to get this, and this is where I'm going to get this, and I think it's about integration with you. You're one of the things that you are a living testimony to is the integration of these forces, figuring out what is healing, what is prophetic, what is true, and integrating those things and rejecting those things
that's a
that are.
beautiful way of putting it. Because Albert Einstein, who I had on my wall as an undergrad, he meant so much for me. Not only because we both played the violin, but here's somebody who's probably the most brilliant mind and intelligence in the 20th century, a level of humility and a hypersensitivity to the suffering of poor people and oppressed people and working people.
But we don't hear that, do we?
Yeah, that side of Einstein we need
really
to highlight more. That's true. It's true. His spirit was just so mature that he could have been arrogant and haughty and condescending and
aloof, really.
Aloof and detached from the world. And You know, his relation to Paul Robeson here, Princeton's own Paul Robeson, Einstein would embrace him. And not that he agreed with everything, but he knew that Paul's heart in the States was so tied to working peoples and poor peoples, and Einstein's heart was so tied to working peoples and poor peoples. I mean, even Einstein's courage in regard to the Israeli-Palestinian issue, to ensuring that there's a sensitivity to Palestinian brothers and sisters, even as Israelis had the kind of security necessary so there wouldn't be another Holocaust. So he was always looking to, I mean, that first chapter of Isaiah, the orphan, the widow, the oppressed, the fatherless, those whose humanity had been rendered invisible. Now, Einstein himself was, you know, kind of spinozistic agnostic in a certain sense. You know, he had a deep spirituality without having any cognitive commitments to any religion or God. But that kind of spirituality led toward, to me, a moral maturity, back to your friend.
Right.
That you got to, that always just deeply inspired me. I was just reading.
I think sometimes that agnosticism can lead to a moral maturity. A little bit of agnosticism, the not knowingness, leading ways to the ways we can know. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No, you're absolutely right. You are absolutely. But that's part of the kind of intellectual humility that we associate with Socrates, who knew that he knew more than anybody else, precisely because he knew he didn't know anything, and they thought they knew what they didn't know. He said, "Oh, that's the intellectual humility there." But it's a seeking. It's in the pursuit. It's an endless quest without ever possessing the truth. That's what's beautiful about it.
An endless quest without ever possessing the truth. I think that sums it up. We are out of time, but I want to thank you so much.
Thank you so much, my brother.
Us here on this show. This is a book that is going to change your life. We are so blessed to be living in a time with Dr. West. So thank you so much for being with us on the Inner Core. Until the next time, look forward to seeing you here on the Inner Core. My name is Paul Rauschenbusch from Princeton University. Live well.